Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the media and observers. Our nation has entered an era where agriculture, which contributed 7.3% to GDP and employed approximately 17% of the entire labor force in 2016, has suffered a series of blows affecting hundreds of communities, thousands of families, threatening their very basic economic survival. Rural Jamaica, which accounts for the bulk of the agriculture sector, is taking a severe beating. From workers in the sugar belt to those in the coffee and cocoa industry, the closure of factories and scaling down of operations have basically put an end to traditional market options for these produce. It has become urgent that all stakeholders and the government must take the necessary steps to address the issues affecting agriculture. The opposition has initiated a series of meetings with the various sectors to discuss solutions and the way forward. We began with sugar farmers in Westmoreland, coffee growers in St. Thomas and St. Andrew, and last week with the Coffee Growers Association. Coffee crisis. Today, I wish to deal with critical developments in Jamaica's lucrative and important coffee industry, especially our Blue Mountain coffee, which now faces a crisis and an immediate threat to the livelihood of some 250,000 farmers, workers, and their families who depend on the industry. The main issue surrounds the decision of the Wallingford Coffee Company and other buyers to halt the purchase of cherry beans from the farmers. Members of the media will recall that the coffee industry is a heavily regulated industry with specific regulations requiring the farmers to sell only to certified buyers. These regulations are strictly enforced by the then Coffee Industry Board and its successor, the Jamaica Agriculture Commodities Regulatory Authority. The issues escalated 2 weeks ago when farmers demonstrated at the gates of Wallingford Mavis Bank Coffee Factory demanding outstanding payments for coffee supplied to the company during the 2017-18 crop. The amount outstanding is over $46 million, representing final payments for $2,000 for approximately 23,000 boxes of coffee bought from the farmers. The demonstration followed rejection of an offer of an additional $884 per box by Wallingford Mavis Bank as final settlement of the 17-18 payment. In addition, the farmers are dissatisfied with the $3,000 per box being offered for the coffee supplied for the 2018-19 crop. As they say, such a price would force them into paying less than the $1,500 per box for picking. Having regards to the input, farmers would be at significant loss. The farmers should be paid no less than $8,000 per box for their coffee. And I want to repeat, it is the view of the opposition that the farmers should be paid at this time no less than $8,000 per box for their coffee. The company is now dissatisfied with the farmers' reaction and demonstration and has decided to suspend buying of the current crop and has taken a decision not to pay the outstanding $46 million owed to the farmers. In the 2 weeks since Wallingford Mavis Bank decision, they have closed the factory and ceased the receival of coffee. As a result, the coffee berries are now falling from the trees, left to rot in the fields. The opposition is now calling for the immediate intervention of the government and the Minister of Agriculture in particular, and JACRA, as critical players in the industry to end this unnecessary situation, as both have not been proactive and are oblivious of this serious crisis. In fact, there is now a serious need for a comprehensive look at the industry to save it from imminent disaster, as well as the ruin of farmers who have served the industry well and enabled Jamaica to reap benefits from the world-recognized #1 product in the coffee market. It cannot be fair for regulations to require farmers to sell to Wallingford, Mavis Bank and other buyers, but buyers can arbitrarily refuse to buy. Government divested its commercial interest in coffee when it divested Wallingford to the Leachin Group in September 2013. But through their leases, these leases from the Commission of Land, these farmers have obligation to Wallingford and the government. The government must either pressure Wallingford and other buyers or buy the coffee beans themselves. There has to be a buyer of last resort, and the opposition suggests it has to be the government, and there is precedence. This is a most unhappy situation. The treatment of the farmers is not fair. They are at a tremendous disadvantage from the sale of their coffee when beans are considered light to the buyout of farms for the purpose of closing them and to the lack of clarity in the lease arrangements since divestment. The public should know that the opposition is in full solidarity with the farmers and the Jamaica Coffee Growers Association to press the government for a complete resolution of the issues to save this important industry. We have met with the association and the opposition assures them of our support. We will continue our dialogue with them. We have a working group which includes our representatives in East and West Rural St. Andrew, as well as West Portland, and also we have to recognize Western St. Thomas as a part of that grouping. We'll continue to monitor the situation and meet with representatives of both Wallingford, Mavis Bank, and other critical buyers. Ladies and gentlemen, I have with me critical persons. We have Marsha Francis from Western St. Thomas. We have Valerie Nita Robertson from Western Portland. We have here Jennifer Housen representing West Rural St. Andrew. And we have to my left Joan Gordon Webley from East Rural St. Andrew. The floor is now open for any questions you might have, and I am sure that my panel will be ready for them. We believe that in 2016, 15-16, farmers were getting in the region of $12,000, $13,000 a box. Where we are now, 2-3 years later, an offer of $6,000 has not been properly honored. When you take into account the cost of picking of the berries, the cost of fertilizer, the cost of chemical to deal with the disease process that many farmers now face, 8,000, and transportation. And as you well know, the road conditions in many of these areas are unacceptable, and therefore high costs for transport. We believe that no less than $8,000, no less. So we're not saying it has, but no less than $8,000. Ladies and gentlemen, if there's a pause between questions, I know that Representative Jennifer Housen would want to say something in relation to the JACRA legislation, the Jamaica Commodities Regulatory Authority legislation.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it's point and shoot ready. When we look at JACRA, as we've heard, it is a heavily regulated industry. Coffee is not the sort of thing you can just put in a truck, load it up, and take it to Coronation Market to sell. It really is a case where, under the Act, which was implemented in 2017, gazetted in January of this year, and really came on stream around about April of this year, we see that it is only now that the impact is being felt, because by and large, there was not necessarily any business analysis, certainly not given to the opposition. We've not had any findings from a business analysis, and certainly would call on the government for that if one is available. But when we look at certain sections of the Act, in particular, we look at sections 14, sections 15, sections 38, and I'll just give you an example of what it says in there. It says that if you're going to grow, and we're focusing on coffee, because JACRA covered about 7 produce. It covered things like pimento, turmeric, but for our purposes, when we look at coffee, it is saying if you're going to grow coffee in Jamaica, you're going to need a license in order to do that. So once you have that license, then you're fine. It is further saying that if you grow coffee outside of the parameters of this, you are likely to be breaking the law. It says you don't have a problem if you've got, 1 coffee root or 2 or 3, you're fine. But it says if you're growing anything from, say, 25 kilos of coffee, roughly what they consider about 50 coffee trees, the Act actually applies to you. It goes on to say that if you do anything contrary to the Act, as a farmer, individual farmer, you could be liable up to a fine of $3 million. And if you've gone ahead and taken a sort of business approach to your coffee growing and incorporated a company, you could be liable on a fine of up to $5 million. Now that is some really heavy stuff when you consider that the government, as we've heard earlier, the buyers, as we've heard earlier, can arbitrarily decide not to buy. If you decide to put it on your head and step down to Coronation Market with it, you could find yourself subject to fines, really heavy fines. In addition, we get to section 38, which tells us that there is a cess, and cess means tax, that there is likely to be a cess on not just imports, but exports, and applies to anybody producing. Producing is obviously applicable to the farmers. So you may well find yourself, and that is in operation now, because part of the monies that you are being paid when you sell to JACRA is by and large going towards that. So the fact of the matter is that when you look at the cess that is imposed, we are also pushing for this to basically be taken off as it relates to farmers, because it is a tax at the end of the day. Where does this tax go to? In the Act, it says that the cess is to go towards subsidizing the running of the authority. So what we're seeing now is that there was no particular consultation with the private sector. And recently we have seen, for example, people like the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce raising this issue. But what we're saying is we certainly have not had any sort of consultation with the farmers, and that has certainly been affected. One of the intended consequence in the divestment of Wallingford to the Leachin group of companies was that there was to be an inurement. It should have been for the best of the farmers to give them benefits. So, for example, one of the benefits that should have inured from that was that the lands that they had that were to go to Wallingford were to be raised to a particular standard to increase coffee production. Again, the question here is whether or not under the terms of the divestment these have been completed. To our knowledge, it hasn't even gone over 50%. So having the lands brought to a standard to increase coffee production. So when we look at the Act, legally, we're saying that because we see the farmers by and large being choked to ensure they stand under the Act, which is why when we come to the question being raised as to where we come from with a figure, the fact is we have no one else to sell to. And so when we look at what a decent figure is based on the Act and what it provides for in respect of the restraint on farmers, that would only be fair.
We definitely have an increase in that. Sorry. We definitely had an increase because many of the younger persons have gone into farming. I myself gave away 10,000 coffee seedlings to farmers within the East Rural, West Rural area, because we were being encouraged by government to bring in more Blue Mountain coffee. But what is of interest to us at this time is that the entire East Rural is like a ghost town. As you're aware, Wallingford and Mavis Bank is in East Rural St. Andrew. At this point in time, most of 99.9% of the buying stations are closed. Over in West Rural, they have to bring their coffee from West Rural, Portland, and that means you would have had to pay for all of that truckage out of that $3,000 that these companies are now suggesting that they are going to pay. Shortly after the Leachin-led takeover of Wallingford, that factory was closed. And so we had hundreds of people being sent home. We haven't heard that anywhere. Mavis Bank is on peppercorn staff. There's hardly anybody there. They've sent them home. And now they've closed it. And so it just does not relate to just those who are planting coffee. It relates now to the pickers, all of the families that are involved in all of the coffee belt. But even more importantly, for the hundreds of ladies that used to be employed within Wallingford and the Mavis Bank Coffee Factory. You go into places like Mavis Bank, used to be very, vibrant. You drive through there and nothing is happening. Everything is down. And a number of the farmers have said to me, Mrs. Webley, we simply cannot send our kids to school 5 days a week any longer, because when they do resume buying of coffee, we'll have to pull some of them to help us to pick coffee, because we simply cannot pay people to come in and pick. Because if we pay $1,500 a box, it means we have $1,500 left. From that amount, we cannot buy fertilizers. We cannot buy manure. We cannot get anyone to help us to clean the fields. And so we are operating at a loss from day one. The coffee farmers, the entire communities that grow Blue Mountain coffee, and I'm assured it's not just Blue Mountain, it's High Mountain as well, is in serious, serious crisis. And since we are regulated, we are saying that the government must play a part. And we did sit with a number of us, and we looked at what is happening. And again, our spokesperson spoke about 8,000. It cannot be less than 8,000 that the farmers are paid, because anything below that, they are just barely breaking even. Something needs to be done.
Should declare interest. Declare interest. That is
I also want each and every one to know that I myself is a coffee farmer. And so I know exactly what is happening. But look at a farmer who has a 2-acre or a 3-acre plot. In my instance, I have to find money to pay the people to service my own farm. But this is bigger than me. It is about all of these farmers that have created a livelihood. They were asked to go into coffee. Now they can't go and sell a grain anywhere, and there's no one to buy it. And mum is the word where government is concerned. Somebody was trying to ask a question.
Hold on, let me see where it's going.
Go ahead.
Hi, morning. William Mitchell from Nationwide News. 2 questions. One, how do you respond to the Wallingford and Mavis Bank Coffee Company saying that they only offer the 3,000 per box or the 4,000 per box based on what they're able to sell it for on the international market? That's one. And two, how do you respond to accusations, assertions, allegations that the vice chair of the Mavis Bank Coffee Company, Mr. Mark McIntosh, was attacked by farmers while he tried to enter the facility a couple of weeks ago?
Absolutely untrue. I myself was there. Untrue that Mark was attacked in any way. Mark McIntosh extended an invitation to myself and our spokesperson on agriculture, Dr. Fenton Ferguson. We sat and we listened to him, and he spoke to us about using this so-called gift that Mr. Leachin spoke about in buying the coffee. And we are saying to him, when we signed on with you, we were getting as much as $13,000 a box. You have brought it down to $6,000. We have documentation that says first amount. And we also have papers that worked out the $2,000 per box more that you have brought it down to. He was saying that he wanted to pay us $884 more per box instead of the $2,000. We said to him that is simply not fair. We have an agreement with you, and you must honor that agreement. You know, there is no way that you can just look at us and tell us, no deal. You have to pay us. After our meeting, he asked me to speak with the farmers and let the farmers know what he's offering. And the farmers by that time had chained the gate. He asked me to have the gate unchained. I let him know that I did not chain the gate. This is the farmers who chained the gate, and I will speak to them. I went up and I spoke to the farmers. I called Mr. McIntosh along with Mr. Norman Grant, and I told him that the farmers want to speak to him directly. I was there. We have several videos that can show Mark McIntosh speaking to the farmers. He kept us waiting nearly 4 hours. We stood our ground. We waited and we waited. He came, he spoke to the farmers. The farmers told him that they were not accepting the $884 more. He went on to say that if he pays out the $844, it would come to 23 million. But if he were to pay out the $2,000 more per box that the farmers are owed, it would come to 46 million. And we are saying to him, but Mr. Leachin says he's giving 60 million. So we will sit afterwards and decide how we will spend the other 14 million. He was adamant that he's not paying that. I asked him, I said, but we are not asking for any handout, only our money. He came, he spoke to the farmers. I stood there all the time. We have persons who are recording it on their cell phones. Those can be made available to you. No farmer, absolutely no farmer, threatened Mr. McIntosh. Police was there, driving up and down. He could have stopped the police had any farmer threatened him. He is lying, and I state categorically that he's lying on these poor farmers. Absolutely lying.
And the issue of the international...
I will take that in two parts. I have a document that tells me you are going to pay me $6,000. Do not come back to tell me that you're only going to give me $4 because I'm poor. When I go to the bank and I make an arrangement with the bank and I say I have to pay you, I can go and tell the bank that my business didn't work out so I can pay you less. Would Mr. Leachin accept that? Don't deal with these farmers although they have no sense. We are sensible. So there's no way he can come with that sort of rubbish to us. And as for the $3,000 that he speaks about, it is not acceptable. It cannot pay us. It just cannot pay us. And government must step in. And we're waiting to hear from them.
I want to just get around with the answer.
Quickly.
Yes.
We get
I just want to, on the phone. I just want to carry on with the question from the gentleman from Nationwide, because I was also present on that Tuesday. And the small point I would make is this. This occurred on a Tuesday. I was there, and as Joan said, we waited about 4 hours or thereabouts for him to turn up. He came, and yes, the farmers were irate, but not to the threats that were suggested. He then said, when they said they would not accept it, he said, right, I will go away and discuss this with the management. He went to his van. Nobody threatened him, followed him. He went to his van. He told them thanks. He left. On the Wednesday morning, he then said, right, he's going to give the $2,000. For the next 8 hours on the Wednesday, they then cut 31 checks for all of the persons who had been at the gate from Monday. So Mr. McIntosh drove away on Tuesday. He would have passed no less than 2 police stations going down. There was a police officer in a van there for about 3/4 of the time he was there. He then went away and cut the checks. The checks were then sent down late on Wednesday. It was then on Thursday that we get allegations of threats, which at no point have we seen any police reports with anybody coming up to East Rural to question any farmers there. And as we said, it is on videotape from start to finish. So just to support what's been said, because I think this is crucial. The reason it is crucial is because in light of that allegation, it has now been where the payment to the farmers for the 2,000, albeit having made for the 31 farmers who were at the gate, have been seized for all the other farmers who would also have been entitled for the period 2017 to 2018. So we would hope that this is not a ploy to then keep the farmers or the rest of the farmers from not being paid. I just wanted to add that to that comment. Thank you.
Yes, and of course, a large number of the rest of the farmers come from West Portland, the constituency which I represent. I think the Jamaican public needs to know that there has also been a decrease in the crops for high mountain coffee. Those farms were bought out. There are a number of farms, and they are almost in total ruin now. So you have to ask yourself, what is the obligation of those persons who have bought out one of our best products in Jamaica? Now, Blue Mountain Coffee is equivalent to Usain Bolt, is equivalent to our tourist industry, and is a niche market that we need to protect. And the farmers put their all into it. They are the ones who have to go on those farms and work them to produce the coffee. Right now in West Portland, the farmers are under serious financial straits. I mean, they can't meet their bills after they have spent millions of dollars on those farms. And it's amazing that the representative of West Portland is on this economic council involved in growth, and not one word or one visit from him to say, let us try and see what we can do. So we also need to know that some of the companies in Jamaica, we import lower-end coffee, what they call Robusta coffee, to mix with the Blue Mountain coffee. And we're supposed to be mixing 10% of the Blue Mountain coffee. And Salada has been complaining that they cannot get enough Blue Mountain coffee to mix, to put on the market. But our berries are on the ground rotting. So something is obviously wrong. I don't know if the coffee is being cartelized, what is happening with it, but we here at this table are committed to protecting the farmers who are the important persons in all of this. And I think Jamaica and Jamaicans we should hear their voices about this niche market that we have here, our Blue Mountain coffee.
Okay.
One of the cost-effective ways, actually, you said earlier that when we're advertising our tourism product, we can do product placement of Jamaica's coffee in advertising their tourism product. What other way do you see that the government can help to boost the industry?
Well, let me just refocus, because first of all, we are talking about, and I have made several attempts to meet with the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries without success. But I want to put on the table that while, in fact, in one of our casual encounter, what he said to me is that it's a private sector thing. But I know that coffee has always been bigger than just a private sector. So if the strategy would have been to divest the coffee in order for government, present or future, to appear not to have a vested interest in it, how could it be when we're talking about a significant amount of earnings from the industry, both in foreign exchange and in what in 2015-16, we made between High Mountain and Blue Mountain about $6 billion. So, you know, it is a big business that impacts the local economy and also foreign exchange earnings. Government must have an interest in what is happening. And this is why we said, yes, President, there are times when coffee, it's not the first time that coffee has had challenges, because it's from time to time a kind of cyclic situation. And the governments have intervened, have put money to help to support the farmers. The government can also intervene in terms of buying the excess beans, and it can be stored for when you consider to be the getting back to a high price. But what is a double whammy that is reaching the industry now? You're getting low prices and low productivity. You are now producing about 30 bucks per acre, when best practice would require somewhere about 90 bucks per acre. So, you know, if you look at it in that context, and at the same time, 600,000 boxes of coffee is coming into the country, imported. 600,000. So that is why the opposition is calling for a review. Look at the industry now. And, you know, a person might argue you were there. The fact is that you are now here. And there is a crisis. The opposition has put on the table, we are willing, stakeholders, to be party to any discourse and discussion that will save what is a most important industry for the people and government of Jamaica. So we, first of all, I think as it relates to Jacra, you would well remember, and I want to the media just to go back, could have been about 3 or 4 months ago, when the JCC was making up noise, when the Jamaica Agriculture Society was making up noise, when the academic community, in terms of agriculturalists, was making up noise, that the Minister of Agriculture had put together a group of persons to review the Jacra Act, and said that it would be, we'd hear from them shortly. We have not heard from the minister. And the opposition is now saying today, we are demanding from the minister the results of that review. We are demanding, because it is critical. You're talking about increased taxation, cess, the registration of farmers, significant fines if they don't register. How can they be registering when they're not getting any pay? It's not fair. And I don't believe, and the opposition will not allow the government to have its way and kill a good industry. We'll not do that.
Thank you.
The government needs to, first of all, take it serious, what is happening in the industry seriously, which they are not. I am aware that a delegation of private sector and others would have gone to China and Japan in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I am not privileged to what would be the outcome of that delegation's visit. But whatever it is, the point the opposition wants to make is that the government cannot take a standoff approach. And therefore, clearly there are persons who have been talking about increasing cess on what is coming in terms of the imports. But there are other ways, I'm sure. If all the critical stakeholders come together, because one of the big issue why the Jackra has turned out to be a disaster. The law, bad law, has passed. And let us argue that we were there. We were there, but it came to Parliament and it was hastily. It was hastily passed in spite of our plea to say there is need for further consultation. So there wasn't any wide-scale consultation. They will argue that. But the farmers are aware. No wide-scale consultation. There wasn't any wide-scale consultation with stakeholders in the industry otherwise, outside of farmers. And so this is why it has become a bad law. Remember, in the first 2 months of its enactment, the chairman of the board resigned. Want to remind you, Stapan Dewey resigned. Within the first couple of months, the CEO of Jackra resigned. All of that is a part of the bad governance arrangement. And I don't remember if anyone has been reappointed. If so, I don't know the name of that person or those persons. That is how serious the government has taken this whole thing. So the opposition, it is not going to rest. Today it is coffee. Tomorrow it is going to be sugar. And we are going to go on to cocoa that has been wiped out with the Foster pod disease. And we have many other, the agriculture sector. What we are getting from the minister now is some sound bites. You're getting sound bites that say, we are going to do this with ganja, we are going to do that thing. But tell me about how many times you have seen him out there in the field with coffee farmers, with cocoa farmers, with, the coconut farmers, little yellowing and all of that. It's not there. That can't work with agriculture. So, we are just giving notice that there's going to be a sustained approach on the part of the opposition in dealing with agriculture and rural development.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.